All right. Hello, listeners. Welcome back to the podcast. Hope everyone's doing well. Today, we're going to be diving into how social media transforms democracy, politics, and public discourse, with inspiration taken from Guy Debord's Society of the Spectacle and Neil Postman's Amusing Ourselves to Death. Today on the podcast, we have the Swagmeister Sophia, the Alaskan Polyglot Sammy, and the Regal Lord of the Midwest, including all of the destroyed industry and rest therein, Kellen Shemansky. And most of what our podcasters are going to be talking about revolves around these discussion questions. Has social media fulfilled the board's warning? Can democracy survive a spectacle driven media environment? Is reclaiming civic engagement online possible? And how should society respond to algorithmic control? First off, we are going to start with the Swagmeister Sophia, who will discuss a lot of the theory. All right, Sophia, take it away.
So, hello, listeners. I'll start off. So, Neil Postman, in Amusing Ourselves to Death, argued that television and by extensions of today's digital media, it happens to just turn everything that we consume into entertainment, whether it be politics, education, even religion. They're all packed to entertain rather than to inform. And the key problem isn't that the content is bad or lousy, but it's rather the form. Television demands that everything be brief, emotional, and engaging, regardless of its seriousness. And this results to political debates just being judged more by charisma than by policy, and education, I guess, in some words, to be infotainment, if you will. It's like information and entertainment combined in one. So you rather take away the information as something fun than it being serious. And the public, flooded with endless snippets of information, stops asking what is true or what really matters and focuses instead on what is amusing or attention grabbing. And Postman described this as a quote unquote peekaboo world, just like TikTok and Reels. Events just flash into our consciousness and disappear almost immediately without depth or consequence. So you don't really even intake the information that comes to you, you just absorb it in the time that you are absorbing it in. So, Guy Debord in The Society of the Spectacle deepened this critique. He described modern life as dominated by images and appearances with the introduction of photography, a spectacle where representation has replaced direct experience. In Debord's view, mass media creates a separate pseudo world where people don't chase reality, but they actually chase the image of what life should look like. It's not about living authentically, but about appearing to live authentically. And just like Instagram, which doesn't sell products, it sells the lifestyle, the dreams, and the curated fantasies that the creators so carefully put on their sites. Life becomes a performance, and the audience to the society, it remains passive and distracted. So the origins of this phenomenon can be traced back to the inventions of the telegraph. So this is where it was all introduced, and it was like a boom to society. And before the telegraph, information was local and relevant. And this matters because the news that people would intake was directly affecting their own community in their town or village. But since the telegraph broke through, it really broke that connection, turning a whole country into a village. So this information that could travel instant across the whole country often actually had no relevance to the daily life of the individual that was hearing it or just finding out about it. People suddenly were aware of distant wars, disasters, and scandals, events they could actually do nothing about, leaving them with this eerie feeling of anxiety and doubt in what their abilities are. Postman called this the beginning of irrelevance, impotence, and incoherence in public discourse. Photography soon followed, again with the invention of cameras and news articles coming with these images, providing powerful images without context, strengthening the emotional reactions of those distant towards events, while stripping away the understanding of what is really happening. Today, social media is a natural evolution of this pattern where people consume an endless feed of disconnected and context free images of stories that they have really nothing to know about and know nothing about. The modern attention economy overwhelms the mind. And today it's really interesting. The average person back in the 70s saw around 500 ads every day, which can be said to be a lot, but today's average is actually 4 to 10,000. And the result of this is attention spans shrinking, critical thinking declining, and for the absolute first time in decades, IQ levels in developed countries such as the States or even the Czech Republic, where we are in right now, they're actually falling and declining again for the first time in decades. So you can see that there's this huge impact, and this bombardment of changes really affected the way people learn and think and intake information. So they have a lot of surface level information, and it's really becoming the norm, and the deep reflective engagement becomes rare. So watching 2-hour movies is not really something the average person does anymore because they can't focus for so long. Pop culture and capitalism works hand in hand to sell these appearances, and people no longer strive to have things, they strive to look like they have them. And it's about presenting a curated identity, whether it's through luxury brands, travel photos, or even political opinions just showed online on social media. Debord called this the ultimate victory of the spectacle, not authentic living, but passive consumption of images. And crucially, people are distracted from the real political and societal issues by an endless stream of entertaining comments. So if you ever see this video of Jaden Smith going like, "Oh, people my age is talking about," can we please talk about the political and economical state of the world right now? You guys should take that seriously because with this infotainment, it's becoming really rare to actually do think about those things. So that's the theory behind this.
All right.
Do you
So
guys have any thoughts?
yeah. So I want to pose a question to the entire podcast crew today. So what are some thoughts on the fact that we now see between 4 and 10,000 ads per day, and how has advanced technology impacted this, and how does it impact politics as well?
I don't want to talk at the same time. Um, no, that's actually a question that I was thinking about too as Sophia was going through our points. Because I think, the theory in of itself is pretty comprehensible when we talk about the transition that we've experienced from the telegraph until now. And I'll touch on that in my section a little bit more. But that specific piece with the ads is really interesting because I think it's one of those things that people even now, they don't realize. Like we talked about that during our class last week, how, you get on the metro, you're not even aware how many ads are, directly in your face every time you open your phone and you go on social media. I mean, in a way, you're really just bombarded with ads. But the transition that we're seeing now from, print and regular media ads is that they're now more and more undercover. For example, maybe an influencer uses like a certain water bottle or something in the background of her video that may not be disclosed, but just the action for using and posting a video with that is in and of itself an ad.
Mhm. What do you guys think about the IQ levels dropping just in this decade?
I mean,
Do you guys think it's like we have? Yeah, sorry, Craig.
no, I don't know if it's within my role as host of this podcast, but I will answer. I feel like it somewhat coincides with the lessening attention spans as we are seeing with modern technology or modern social media. Like you have YouTube Shorts, you have TikTok, you have Instagram Reels, where they're all 30 to 60 seconds. I know some can be a little longer, but the attention span of kids and teens and even adults anymore is lessening. So therefore, like you can't even get a kid to read a book without getting distracted after a couple minutes. So I feel like it is all connected in that way. And I mean, it's showing with the IQ levels dropping that modern
To play
social media and
devil's
technology.
advocate,
Go on.
I think we tend to always associate media, short form content, and attention spans, and then translate that onto IQ. I think personally, and I have nothing to support this other than my own opinion, that the mobility of technology and the increasing amount of time that children spend inside at a young age, that is much more impactful rather than just the short form content. Though it probably does play a factor. It's just I see it as one of many rather than, a sole cause. I think the biggest difference in the last 30 years is that nowhere you go are you alone anymore.
No, and it would be reductive to reduce it to one singular cause because it is not an easy issue.
Well, if I
But-
could even expand it further, in my mind, the decline of the IQ is directly tied to this rise of anti-intellectualism, and especially the alt-right and a lot of the conservative media that we're seeing, because that's really fueled by misinformation. But a lot of people, they fall victim to said misinformation because they aren't developing those critical thinking skills. And so while one might necessarily not cause the other, they are definitely extremely closely linked, in my mind.
All right.
If I
Can I-
may just add one more point.
Last
I did
point,
mention
last
that
point.
there's this, yeah, last point. There's this thing of where people want to look like they have a life instead of actually having that sort of life. Could it be that, like Kellen, he mentioned the mobility of technology, like the fact that we have our phones in hand at all times throughout the day, we have this sort of information. So it's like we have the potential to know rather than to actually know. And I think that has a really big part because people don't really take time to learn things because they say once it gets to that point, I'll just watch a YouTube video and I'll
Mhm.
learn it on spot. So it could be that people don't develop any, not only critical thinking skills, but they just don't think as much as they used to in the past because there's no need to. Anywho, that's my last thought.
Excellent point. Excellent point. But yes, time does restrict us in this certain case.
Definitely.
Thank you, Jacob Mays. Just kidding. We love you. All right. On to the Alaskan polyglot. Sammy, you were going to talk about the modern spectacle. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. So
Yes, take
I
it
think
away.
that Sophia did a really great job of introducing the theory for us. And now I think it'd be really beneficial to talk about that theory in a very practical application. Like I said, I think that social media is really a perfect example when we talk about the modern spectacle. Just because, as we already discussed, and I don't mean to be like repeating myself, but I think really social media is a perfect example about needing to be entertained and having media that is always grabbing your attention. So, like we talked about, it's not necessarily about policy or, the what a politician, for example, is running their platform on, but rather if they're able to grab your attention and how effective they are able to be in presenting themselves as someone who is, literate in that way. I kind of want to like put this as maybe a positive and negative side, because in my mind, social media really kind of is a double-edged sword. So in my mind, a good example of the positive side of social media would be something like we saw with the Black Lives Matter movement in 2020. I actually looked it up, and according to the Pew Research Center, the hashtag Black Lives Matter was mentioned on Twitter almost 48 million times between May and June alone, when the movement was really at its largest. And I think through this, we can see how social media, while yes, it's able to grab people's attention, in this case, it's grabbing people's attention for a good cause. It's raising awareness in maybe a way that typical media is not able to. Whereas, I mean, especially with something like the Black Lives Matter, where it definitely was more controversial, that's not something that maybe, regular media is willing to talk about. So when we have these platforms like social media, where it makes these movements more accessible, people are really just able to engage, get information, and be made aware of the problems that are plaguing our country. But just to make sure that we're staying with time, I think that when we do see the positive side of social media, there is definitely also a negative side, like we've touched on several times, with needing our attention to be grabbed with social media, because it's about, having the right, opening to your video and making sure that you can really reward the attention. And we see through, I forget what study it is, but there's a lot of examples where false news and negative news spreads much quicker on social media because it's able to really grab people's attention. And I think that social media can really become an echo chamber, not really for truth, but like I said, for attention. So you have these little catchy sound bites or, different memes. And like Sophia mentioned, it's not about, like, oh, what did you say? Oh my gosh, you're gonna have to cut this part out. Let me start that again. Anyways, yeah, basically social media really benefits from outrage and fear and anger, which is a direct pathway towards misinformation. I think that social media is really a hotbed for information because it's more about, seeming like you understand the information rather than taking the time to really understand it, really in depth and really dig into an issue. For example, you just read one headline and all of a sudden you think that, you're the expert. So, well, that's my little 2 cents on the positive and negative sides that social media can really offer us when we're looking at it through the lens of the modern spectacle. So the question that I would pose to the class or to the group would be, what do you guys think about the potential survival of democracy within this sort of arena that we have? And maybe any reactions?
I guess I'll jump in first. So I guess I am optimistic and pessimistic in this way. Personally,
There's always both sides.
I view social media as a lose-lose, and I personally, old man here, don't really use it a ton, and I think we lose more from it in regards to our willingness to go interact with other people than we ever really gain from it. I think this has kind of created a really weird scenario where people that used to be, a letter away or a phone call away are now like 3 seconds and a text away, and that changes everything, and that changes proximity, and it feels like you can never get distance. And I think that is essential, especially when to kind of tie back to democracy, because then you're always obsessed with federal politics, you're always obsessed with how everything is going on in your state, when it used to take weeks for you to get a response or a decision on something, and then you had to wait, formulate, and then send because you had to anticipate what was coming next. So I think
Well,
it's
that's exactly what we talked
a
about
critical
in
thinking
class.
thing.
Oh, for sure. And I feel like that also really ties in well to what we talked about in class, where, yes, you do know this, but how is it really benefiting you? How is it really impacting you? How is the knowledge of what's happening, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 miles away? Is it really that important?
If I may just jump in, I also think it's really, really interesting how this lack of distance that we have kind of, again, if I may draw back to the point, makes us think less about what's happening because we have this constant, like if it comes to politics and democracy, we have this constant flow of information that honestly could just be made of, oh, what do you like about this politician if you're so for him? It's because he did this and this and this. And if you actually try to recite where you got that information from, it is possible you got it from a TikTok or even a reel that nobody is cross-citing, no one's checking for its credibility. You just see it once and you believe it because it's on the internet. And whether you believe it or not in that moment, that information somehow does stick around in your brain, although I did say that it doesn't. It does stick in your brain when the conversation is announced on spot. You go and dig up whatever information you have in your head, and that one TikTok you saw about misinformation may just be the points you make. So people just don't think as much as they used to before, even in democracy. And I think that just really leads to huge issues in propaganda, especially with AI, for being able to just formulate false images of whoever you really want.
Yeah, thank you guys for your discussion points. I think that really illustrates the points that I was trying to make well, especially with those examples.
I have one other example I was thinking of with the spectacle and the use of AI and false images. I'm sure you have all seen videos of Donald Trump's ASMR, where he is, on Twitter, he posted videos where it was deportation ASMR. And it was like the sound of chains and people being arrested and boarding planes to be
Like
deported
people
to.
who whisper into the microphones?
No, like I don't know. It was
This is just like
uh,
an auditory video, I think, right?
there was yeah, but it was like deportation ASMR, and it was one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen. And I feel like the spread of that and encouragement of those kind of hateful rhetorics, those kind of hateful uses of it is not a positive aspect. But I do agree with Sammy's points about how it was used in, for example, the Black Lives Matter movement, the Me Too movement, the Arab Spring, although it ultimately did not result to mass change. But yeah, that was my recent example that I was able to come up with. But we are at 4 minutes for this discussion, so we shall move on once again to the Regal Lord of the Midwest, including all of the destroyed industry and rust therein. I hope, Jacob Mays, you can relate to the destroyed industry and rust as you are a fellow Midwesterner. Kellen,
Yeah.
can democracy survive the spectacle? Take it away, sir.
Okay, so I guess I'm going to try to give a brief line for the history of how mass communication has changed in this last, I don't know, 200 years. We've seen basically technology shift in such a colossal way in the last 200 years. We have telegraph to radio to TV to what eventually becomes telephones, and then we have texting and then modern mobile telephones, and this has created such a significant change in how we review the world. And the uniqueness about De Boer's argument is that he's writing in the 70s, I think, and this is something that he is thinking about without even the use of telephones. He's thinking just on the basis of TV and radio and the ability to send telegraph. And this is something that's not really ever, he thought, from my understanding, that it would go so much further as it has so quickly. And so the uniqueness is we see his arguments in a weird light that the spectacle has gone up and up and up and up in our lifetimes alone even. And that has created a new relevance to, I think, some of his points, because he doesn't have as much of a broader understanding of our technology, but somehow, by pure luck, most likely, he was able to outline how society would spread. And I think this is kind of ties into like the three eyes, and these have become even worse. Like we have the immediate understanding of global news where there's no ability for us to understand or access any way of understanding that. We have, the obvious like understanding that these issues that are happening across the world, we have no ability to help. And then, it's really weird because you open the news now, and even if you read the news in a paper or watch it in a YouTube clip or whatever, it's completely jarring. There is no consistency. There's no broader, hey, let's sit down and have a conversation and explain what's going on in X place or X thing nearby. It's, hey, look, something's happening in Ukraine, something's happening in Israel, something's happening in the US, Germany's doing X, Japan's doing Y, and then it's a repeat. So I guess it's a weird thing, but I guess we don't understand it in the way that he saw it entirely because of our context is just so widely different. And these effects, I think we said with the ads, there's such a big break between what we experience today and what we see later, and what we see. I guess what we saw in the past is a better way to putting that. So I guess I'll put a question to the class here to kind of to provoke opinions. Is there's no putting the genie back in the bottle, and I don't know if we'd want to, but is it positive that we've seen all of this growth in the ability to, and not just communicate alone, but travel, like the ability to get around and talk to people is unlike anything it was before? And is that something that we should be proud of, or something that we should work to regulate and limit?
Can I go first? Yeah. I think you pose a really good question because, one can definitely argue for the benefits of travel, just, being yourself a more globalized person, I guess you could say. But I think it is also, I feel like it's the same as our previous point, where it's really a matter of your ability to critically think and your ability to make, well thought out decisions as far as who you choose to engage with, where you're traveling to, how you are acting when you're in these different types of situations, and how you're engaging with, the people that you're meeting. I think it's less about where you're going or how far you're going or how far your information is traveling, and more so about how you're choosing to interpret or react or even approach those things in the first place.
Very good point.
That's a very eloquent way to put that.
Sophia, any thoughts?
I think honestly for this traveling thing, I think it should be regulated to an extent, just because, well, not regulated as in the way of we should stop letting people travel, but rather the fact that we kind of experience other people's lives through the screens, and then when we are going through that experience on our own, we actually don't even feel the need to do so because we've already lived through it through the screen. So I feel like this bombardment of being able to travel so far, like it's nothing. Like booking a flight right now, I could go wherever I want later tonight if I really chose to. And if I couldn't afford the flight, I could just open TikTok and see someone else traveling. I think we're spoiled, but I think we take the reality that we have for granted for sure. Again, with the critical thinking, we just don't critically think to, let's say, enjoy the moment and take it all in as it is, but rather we try to portray that ideal scenario that we were hoping for because we already saw it through someone else's screen and try to replicate it. Perhaps,
Yeah.
not personally speaking, but in general, I think it's very plausible that a lot of people are living this way.
And I guess the one way this has been preserved, is through the post. Like I sent a package to my family recently, and there's nothing like,
Mhm.
waiting for a response from that. And I feel like that's the only time is when you physically want to give someone something
Mhm.
across a large distance is where you're forced to wait and feel that anticipation and plan out what you want them to open up when they see that letter or box or whatever.
Okay, but even a personal anecdote, my girlfriend sent documents from Mexico to here, and she sent them on Friday, and they arrived today. From not one of the biggest cities in Mexico, so it had to go to Mexico City and then to Kentucky for the UPS like massive shipment, and then to Munich, and then it arrived today,
Wow,
Friday
that's
to
so
Monday.
fast.
So even the fact that you can send something and it arrives in one weekend is crazy with how interconnected and how fast everything is. To get from not even a major airport in Mexico to Prague, not even one of the major airports in Europe, in 4 days, 2 business days.
That's a miracle. I have had to wait 40 days for packages and stuff to be delivered. I
Dang.
sent stuff in the halfway through March and it didn't for Easter and it didn't arrive until like this week.
Well,
And
okay,
I'm
she sent it on UPS on like one of the fast shipping options, and it still wasn't even that expensive, to be
Wow.
honest.
me
It wasn't
too. Like
expensive.
maybe it's
I guess
just UPS hates me. Maybe it's that.
You got unlucky.
maybe it's the
Yeah.
destroyed industry
No,
and rust they're in the Midwest.
I mean, to your credit,
Most
Kellen, I've
likely.
had the same problem when my mom's tried to send me stuff from Alaska. I mean, granted, it's probably from freaking Alaska, but I've had to wait the like full 40 days. But I have to say, I really appreciated the point that you brought up about um, trying to make an effort to engage with physical things rather than all through social media or online, because I think that's so important. Like my grandmother, she's 87 years old. She doesn't know how to use a phone. She doesn't want to learn how to use a phone. If I want to talk to her, I have to write her a letter and then wait for her to respond, like 2 or 3 weeks later. And that's how I'm able to stay in touch with her. Like if I want to like send her a picture, I have to go through the DM and print it out and put it in the envelope and mail it to her. But I do agree that, really trying to make an active effort to engage in that type of media, or just in that type of communication, in a way, it's really enjoyable, and it kind of helps you to disconnect from just so much like fakeness, I guess you could say, like Sophia talked about with social media.
Mm. I feel like sending letters and receiving packages is just so much more special than DMs and whatever you can get online. And I think everyone who receives these packages, like you sending a letter to your grandma, it must be so much more special to communicate with her than to just be texting your friends, just because it's in that paper form, not only because she's your grandmother, but yeah, it's to appreciate the real things that take the real
I wonder
time
how
in
older
real life.
generations would feel about that. I don't think any of us can understand how the older people feel, but maybe Jacob Mays can give us his commentary since, he's an old man.
Calling him old.
Yeah, I wonder if the older generation would be like, I remember when we had to wait 1 whole year for a letter to come and you had to go by horseback.
Okay, I think we should probably move to our
Yeah,
conclusion
okay.
because we're running a little high
Kurt,
on time.
Do you want to give us your recommendations?
Yeah, so
And we can wrap it up?
yeah, so I won't take too long, but I've got 3 major recommendations here. The first of which being regulation. Mainly this comes from the various governments all around the world. We saw a recent example in the US with trying to ban TikTok, and a very funny example of a senator not understanding that Singapore was not a part of China. So government regulation of social media use. There was an example in Australia as well. I think it was Australia where kids under 16 are not allowed to download any form of social media as it is damaging to them. So regulation can be a very good asset to preserve social media and its positive uses, and to regulate it and prevent its negative uses. Another recommendation would be digital media literacy, basically just educating people how to use social media. This could be whether through, honestly, probably should start younger, because kids, you go out and about anymore and kids are on iPads, on phones from a very young age, from too young of an age. So training parents as well how to properly use and raise kids with technology, and then kids being taught how to use technology and how to use social media as well, would be critical in our world. And the third point, grassroots activism. This can start just from like advocating for these proper usages of social media and education, and making these points known all around the world, so the damages of social media are prevented and the positive aspects are preserved. Throughout this podcast, we have mentioned many different positive aspects, so those are the ones we would like to preserve. But the spreading of false news, the spreading of hate through activism, those can be prevented. I believe that is all from me. Do we have any other comments from our podcasters today?
Yeah, honestly, just live more.
Live more, go more
Live
places.
more. Yeah.
Write a
Uh,
Stay
letter or
connected to those
two.
people around you.
Write some letters,
Mm.
see some more places, go to
I
more
would
live
say,
events and don't record them.
yes, that. I would say be more mindful of the media that you consume, but also the media that is fed to you.
Mhm.
And appreciate media for what it can do, but be careful of what damages it can also cause.
You use those critical thinking skills. They're up there. Just get those wheels turning.
All right. Is that it from us today?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes.
Thanks to our
Podcast out.
listeners.
Thank you, listeners.
Podcast out.
Shout out Jacob
Thank
Mays.
you.
Shout out Jacob Mays. He's a real one.
Shout out Jacob Mays.
Favorite professor. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Trying to
Okay.
get these
Thank you
extra
guys
points
so
for us,
much.
guys. Thank
Yeah.
you, guys. I will stop the
All right,
recording.
ciao.
All right.
Okay.
Stop recording.